His three men take pleasure in killing zombies during a zombie outbreak, and they won't even let humans go. The man who is running from them is Nick. Last night, his family set fire to the manor, so Nick decided to wander off on his own, believing his family to be more terrifying than the zombies. He is going to find a place where zombies are not treated like monsters. The next day, the maid who survived the fire gave him some supplies and told him that if he went north, he'd find a town inhabited by humans. So Nick set out on his own to go north. He coats his body in zombie blood, so they won't give him any trouble. By nightfall, Nick was exhausted and came to rest in an abandoned house. In the middle of the night, a figure tried to approach him. The next thing he knows, a woman is hitting him with a baseball bat like a madwoman and saying that this is her place. Nick was a little confused and didn't understand the situation, so he said he'd get his backpack and leave. But the woman was out of her mind. If she kept it up, Nick would have been killed. So Nick could only run away. Even without the backpack and supplies, he could only move forward. Nick wasn't scared of the zombies sitting in the car. After all, he thinks they're a lot simpler than humans. At this point, a drop of water could be the only thing keeping him alive. While he was tuning the radio, an SUV drove by in the distance. Nick crouches down and hides. Three strong men come out of the car, seemingly killing zombies for fun. They scrutinize the cars for what's in them, and in the process, they find an old man who survived dehydration. The old man asks for help, but what they do is a shock to Nick. If Nick is found by them, he's not going to survive. Coincidentally, the radio came on, so Nick took a chance and ran out into the road. When the three men saw him, they opened fire on him. Nick realized that the only way to survive was to run into the woods. He dodged countless bullets with his deft maneuvering. He didn't know how long he'd been running before there was no sound behind him. The intensity of the exercise had taken a lot out of him. The sun's rays had stripped the cactus of its moisture, so he had no choice but to crush the cactus and eat it. However, this high-end ingredient made him vomit. He even drank his own urine to survive. The next day, Nick was awakened by the barking of a wolf dog. He could only climb to the roof of the car to get away from the dog, but he already had long bites on his legs. As Nick was lying on the roof with no way to escape, a pack of zombies approached him in the distance. The dogs thought everyone was as easy to bully as Nick, so they pounced on the zombies. Of course, I think you know what happened to these dogs. The dogs' bones were eaten by the zombies in no time. Then the zombies quickly gathered around Nick. Nick could only close his eyes and pray for a miracle. But suddenly, there was a siren and gunshots in the distance. I think it's the sound of the three men who were chasing Nick. Then the zombies turned around and headed towards the sound. Seeing that the zombies were far away, Nick ate a piece of the dog's carcass while holding back his nausea. Tie up his injured leg with a belt. Then he smeared his entire body with zombie blood. Nick walked in the line of hundreds of zombies. He felt safer than he'd ever felt before. He even heard the zombies say to him, "Follow us. We'll take you home." The zombies soon came to the highway and headed towards the place where the gunshots were fired. It's true that the three of them made such a loud noise on purpose. They are killing the zombies for fun. One by one, the zombies fell to the ground as they were shot by the three of them. At the end of the highway comes a group of zombies, and in this group there is a human mixed in. He's almost indistinguishable from a zombie except for his eyes, which are darting all over the place. An SUV is honking its horn as it heads toward the zombies. The three of them enjoy their daily zombie slaughtering contests. Nick knows that if he reveals himself to be human, he'll be tortured to death by the three of them. As the zombies fall around him, Nick remains serious as he and the zombies advance towards the three of them. The man, in his panic, accidentally drops all his bullets on the ground. Just as he picked up the bullet and lowered it, the zombies had grabbed him and started to bite, with the other men also pounced upon by the zombies. Their remaining companion took off in his car. Nick chose to continue marching with the zombies, but little did he know that someone had already noticed his difference. Shortly after, Nick collapsed on the road due to dehydration. The three of them didn't look like bad guys, but they didn't choose to save Nick. After all, it's not easy to live in a post-apocalyptic world. Nick collapsed in the middle of the road and felt like he was approaching death. Every cloud has a silver lining. A heavy rain in the night woke him up again. He opens his mouth and rehydrates happily. The next day, he arrived in a small town. He hadn't eaten for 2 days and didn't know how much longer he could last. But he knew that the most important thing now was to disinfect his wounds. Unfortunately, the drugstore had been emptied of all medicines. He could only use tape to simply bandage his wound. Just then, 3 men with guns came in the door. The same 3 people who had observed Nick's unusual behavior through binoculars from afar yesterday. He rushes to explain that the wound on his leg is a dog bite and not a zombie. Luciana gave Nick some water after confirming that he wasn't infected. Then the 3 of them took him to a clinic to dress the wound. The doctor disinfected it and asked him why he was traveling with the zombies. Nick said he wanted to go somewhere where they weren't monsters. The doctor doesn't say anything else but opens the door. Nick walks out and has a surreal feeling. This place is bustling with people going to the market and working out. Children were living here and growing up happily. Nick knew this was the place he wanted to be. The next day, Nick woke up feeling the most comfortable sleep he'd had since the zombie outbreak. But when Nick went outside, there was nothing on the streets where there used to be a lot of activity. He walked for a long time before he saw a little girl with tears in her eyes. She called out to her dad, who was standing in the distance. Nick looked up and saw that everyone was gathered in this playground. A man came to the doctor and handed over his dagger. After saying his last goodbyes to his loved ones, he walked into the bus and made his way to the back of the bus. It turns out that this abandoned bus is the only way for this base to reach the outside world. Soon the man is in the midst of the zombies. Nick doesn't know what's going on, but he doesn't want the little girl to see this bloody scene. The villagers are making noises that seem to be some kind of sacrificial incantation. Soon the man's screams echoed across the sky. One after another, the zombies didn't hesitate to eat today's lunch. After the sacrifice was over, everyone went back to their normal lives. Luciana found Nick and brought him to the bus once again. Luciana is very cold when Nick asks her questions. She then stepped out of the bus into the crowd of zombies and engaged in a one-on-one fight with a zombie whose arm she pinned to the wall with a knife, followed by a knife to the neck that she didn't hesitate to slash at. After a series of fights, she reprimands Nick to be quiet at all times. Nick smears zombie blood all over his body. Then Nick followed Luciana on her way out. The purpose of their trip is to exchange supplies with other survivor bases. On the way, Nick finally realizes the answer to the question of why they're living here. It turns out that the actual leader of this base is the doctor, who is a religious man, and Luciana saw him being bitten by a zombie without turning into one. This reinforces the doctor's great status in people's minds. In this base, whenever someone is bitten by a zombie, they are sacrificed to the walking dead and then protected from their loved ones. The two of them soon arrived at the place where the supplies were exchanged. This used to be a large supermarket and is now occupied by a group of survivors. This place is full of men and hot weapons. Almost all of the neighboring bases come to this supermarket to exchange supplies. The medicines Luciana took out could have been exchanged for the carts of water, but now she's only allowed to fill one cart. In a post-apocalyptic world, all supplies are precious. Luciana's bag of medicine will only allow her to take one cart of goods from the group. The inside of the supermarket is very empty and well guarded. Their families live in the supermarket. Nick caught sight of a sickly woman. He recognized the symptoms of a drug attack. So these people were dependent on the medications Luciana had exchanged for them. But just as they grabbed their supplies and were about to leave, a man rushed up and knocked Nick down. He soon found a bag of snacks on Nick. At this point, Luciana is furious with him and hates him for what he has done. Nick was in danger of having his hand chopped off. Since he was not of their race, he had to ask Luciana to translate for him and ask if the woman in the supermarket was their sister. Luciana had no other way to save him but to translate for him and ask if their sister was sick. Nick goes on to say that your sister's drug addiction has kicked in. Right, we're the only ones with the medicine right now. If you don't let me go, we'll never come back here to exchange supplies again. If she doesn't have the medicine, you'll see her turn into a zombie in a week's time. Not only do you have to let me go, you have to give us another cart of water. As they let go of his hand, Nick knew he had just made the right bet. Then the two of them pushed the cart on their way home. Nick was still gloating about the extra cart of water. Luciana, however, was not happy because his stupidity could have gotten them both killed, and she couldn't let those people find out where the base was. Back at the base, Nick gives the bag of snacks to the little girl who has just lost her father. Luciana saw him do it. She realized that he didn't take the snacks for himself, but to give the little girl some comfort. Luciana got to know this man all over again. Then Nick was called in by the doctor to talk to him. The doctor reprimanded Nick for what he had done at the supermarket and told him that it wasn't the bag of snacks that really gave people hope. It was the fact that they could live longer. They don't have much medicine left to trade. So what are they going to trade with the guys at the supermarket? And Nick finally realizes what a mess he almost made. I have to say that the doctor is a great leader. The doctor not only establishes a base of survival in this post-apocalyptic world, but also allows people to live with faith. The next day, Nick approached the doctor with a can of powdered milk and a bold idea. Since Nick was a drug addict before, he knew what to use as an alternative to drugs when he had no money. He used the doctor's equipment to crush up the few medicines he had and mix them with the powdered milk. Then he compresses them again to make pills. These freshly made pills would buy the people of the base a long time to survive. In the days that followed, Nick became more and more comfortable here and got along with everyone. He went out every week to exchange supplies. To thank Nick for his contribution, the doctor gave him a room of his own. Nick was thrilled to see this, although he doesn't speak the language of the villagers. This is now a real sign of acceptance. That night, Luciana came to his room for the first time to talk to Nick. Then the two of them started kissing and became even closer. Everyone says the Travis family is too self-righteous and causes destruction wherever they go. In the next episode, we'll see what happened to the Travis family after they were separated from Nick.